That's going to be a full definition live that we're starting with. That's 1080p, my friends. Happy Friday. Good morning. Let's take our simultaneous sip, as we all do at the start of the live show, with our Walt Disney mugs. Y'all got Walt Disney mugs, right? You're all in partnerships with people that are obsessed with Disney, right? And then your mug cabinet is completely filled with Walt Disney based mugs. That's not just me, right? Please. Please, someone. That's not just me. Well, here we are on another Friday. Lovely Friday. It's just Adam Quiney, your host for the live show and the midweek episode of the podcast today. It's going to be a little bit, we're starting a little bit early, and we're going to be a little bit on the shorter side today because I have an all-important haircut to get to, and then I've got some pickleball to go and play. And so, you know, when you've got these important, when you're living a big life like this, when you've got these important things in front of you, you got to make time for them. So, what I'm going to talk about today is this will be a little extended. I talked briefly about this on an earlier podcast episode, but for those of you who don't watch, this will probably be new. And the subject I want to cover is what happens when competency is no longer a scarce commodity. And that's what AI has done. So I'll lay out the case for how AI has created a abundance in something that formerly was scarce. And we'll talk about sort of that. We'll use money as an analog to that, so you can kind of see how that shifts the game. And then talk about like consequences of that, what we're going to see likely happen. And then what that'll do really nicely is it'll pack me in with the other 40 million people offering hot takes on AI, produced by AI. But actually, this one's not. This is my own thoughts on this, and I'm looking at it through an ontological lens. How was the week, Adam? Before we get into that, did anything cool happen this week? This felt like a pretty relaxed week. It was interesting. I came off of the weekend feeling pretty restless and agitated, which was odd because I did a ton of work over the weekend. I built a bunch of furniture like a real authentic man, putting together IKEA furniture. What's more manly than that? We're working to get our suite renovated and get that all sorted out. So I did that, but I came into the week feeling a little bit impatient, a little bit frustrated. I had to catch myself a few times. And one of the sure signs of that for myself, one of the things I've learned to look for is I get into a dialogue with a person that is unaware, but I just fabricate a person and then I get into an argument with them. Or I talk to them frustratedly about the thing they're doing that's impacting me. So this was really effective when my work was as an attorney and my job was to kind of foresee the arguments people might make and then build a strong argument that would assail that and so on and so forth. And it's good because it's a way like I can explore ideas or, you know, be in the dialogue. One of the things I liked the most about practicing law was that the person I worked with, we would do what we called throwing the football, which would be we'd get into the room together and we'd sort of like offer an argument, and then the person would sort of role play the judge and be like, well, counselor, what about this though? Because that doesn't really make sense as far as I can see, blah, 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 blah. So I kind of enjoyed that, and I like that still. But what I notice often is happening is that I'm sort of, when I do that, hello, Pongo, come on in. Oh, or just kick the door open. When I do that, what's happening is I'm projecting a story about how that person is and how they'll show up and the way they'll be. And then I'm building an argument against that projection. And what that does is it entrenches the perspective I have of them. So it diminishes my ability to be curious about them or to have the possibility that maybe there's something here I don't know, because I'm building a strong case against the stuff I've already determined on some level kind of exists, and it entrenches me in that. So anytime that's happening, I'm usually like, oh, there's something up for me here. There's some frustration, or there's some part of me that's not being felt, and it's harder to descend into that because it's really satisfying to stay at the level of the intellect and to argue and to build my case and to prove that I'm right. That's well-worn, reliable territory for me. It's harder to slow down and and simply sit in, I feel like I'm being missed, or I'm not being seen, or I feel sad, or I feel frustrated, or, whatever. And then just sit in the feelings of that. But that's usually where my work lies these days, because if I can do that, I can put my attention on the guy that I do have control over, and I can let that other person sit aside for now until we actually get into a conversation, and I can bring some curiosity to it, or exploration, or rebuild the relationship, or I might see something that I've done, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been an interesting week through that lens. All right, let's have a sip. Ooh la la. That's a little half calf today. Before we dive in, a quick, what is this? This is a trailer. It's a plug. That's what I'm doing. I'm plugging the intensive. The intensive is coming up May 26th through 29. What this event is a threshold event for people that have reached the awareness on some level that competency, as in reading more books, becoming better at doing something, learning more skills, there's a limitation that you're starting to feel in terms of what you're already reliable to do. And you're feeling some kind of threshold that you might be at where it's like, it feels like there's something deeper that is wanting to come forward, or that I'm trying to touch, but I can't. And all of the energy spent trying to improve, optimize, get better at, learn more skills inside of the existing range you have, all of that doesn't seem to be getting at that thing. And so there's a leadership container, leadership structure that is designed to meet people at that threshold point and then support them to unlock whatever the thing is, so that they can not just get better at the range they're already reliable at operating in. You can think of it like a pie. And if you're reliable and really good within the 30% of that pie, you can learn more skills and push that pie edge out further. What this event is about is broadening the range of your pie, so that instead of being really, really good at doing stuff at 30% of what's available, you can now express yourself in 60% of your pie and then achieve mastery in all of that. And that opens the door to a whole bunch more possibility, career options, promotions, ways of leading teams, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're interested in learning more about that event, the URL is here. It's evergrowthcoaching.com/the-intensive. That website is out of date. I'm just in the process of working with someone to update it. So don't judge it too harshly based on the website. But if you're curious about it, you can send me a message on any number of these social medias. You can email me directly, adam@adamquiney.com. You can write a comment. I'm always happy to talk about it. It's a phenomenal event. It's going to be I'm really excited for this May. I've got a bunch of really cool people that are already lined up and coming. We're going to have some really cool different kind of career types in the room, former politicians, lawyers, accountants, some coaches, some people that are leading in like a whole bunch of different like areas of life. Hopefully I'm trying to bring up a shaman, like really bring a bunch of different people. And what that provides you is the opportunity to see, wow, leadership and this threshold we're talking about, it is not specific to a particular position or career or organization. And what that does is also broadens your vision of leadership and what's possible from your leadership. So it's going to be a really amazing event. I'm super excited about it. And if you'd like to know more, find out. Enough of that. Get out of here, Banner. Pew. Okay. Bam. Now we're into this topic. AI : I didn't put an M dash, even though I friggin' love M dashes. I've been writing for like 20 years. And for the longest time, my use of the M dash was very unique. And I liked it because I felt it made my writing kind of dialogical, conversational. The M dash is like a pause, which I like in my oration, in my rhetoric. And then stupid friggin' AI came on and was like, hey, everyone, here's an optimal way to speak rhetorically and to convince people of things and to move humans. And now everyone uses the dumb M dash. And now I feel like a loser for trying to use it. So anyhow, I put a colon there. Now clearly AI didn't generate that. Okay, so silliness aside, what happens when competency is no longer scarce? So let's build this case and then we'll talk about the impact of it. Let's start with an analogy. And the analogy is we're going to look at money. So we live in a world in which money is our experience, our relationship with money is that there is a degree of scarcity to it. Most of us want more money. Most of us are like, there's stuff I could do to get more money, but it requires energy, time, et cetera, et cetera. I would like more. I'm trying to get more, but there's like this underlying tension of scarcity. It's not everywhere. We have to work, we have to do stuff to acquire money. So I'm using the term scarce to describe that. And because the money is scarce, it's not abundant. Um, this is not, as an aside, this is not an ontological distinction right now. So if any of you are kind of steeped in ontological work, you may be like, well, Adam, abundance is actually a context, and you can, yeah, that's not the conversation. And if you argue with me at that point, that's how you're going to sound, and I'll make that impression of you. So we're talking like literally there's a scarcity. Money is not all abundant and around us, and I just don't grab it and put it towards anything. So because of that, there's a couple things in the world that fall out from that. The first is that there's a lot of professions designed to get you more money. Given money is scarce, given you want money, well, that's a pretty easy sort of demand supply curve. There's professions, many, many, many professions that are geared towards providing you money. That's like the first order of meeting that scarcity. Profession, so like a banker, an investment banker, et cetera, et cetera. It's not to suggest that's the only reason people use these professions, but for the most part, investment bankers exist because money is scarce. We want more of it. It sets us up for something, and therefore we seek people out that can fill that need. The second order of this sort of profession are people that are not directly making you more money, but they're making you more of something. And underneath that, the reason you want more of the something is so you can have more money, by and large. So this would be like in my profession, the coaching profession, there's a frig ton of marketing. And every single one of these marketers has the same tired pitch, which is like, hey, curious. They're always curious. Curious if you'd be interested in 20 leads a week, or, whatever it happens to be. Just curious. Hey, Andre, good to see you. Oh, wow. That's really beautiful what Andre wrote. I'm just going to read it out loud. Andre, thank you for sharing that. He said, hey, man, I've got one session with you from 10 years ago. We didn't follow through, but that one session made a big difference for me. Thanks for the work that you put out. You probably helped much more people in a more impactful way than you thought. That's so kind. Thank you so much, Andre. Really lovely to see you. So we've got the second order, right? Marketing, they are trying to sell coaches clients, because if coaches get clients, then the coaches will be able to make money, and then that meets the scarcity of money. Most of the coaches I talk to are not interested in a service that is based on getting them leads and generating and marketing and all of that. Like if money was abundant, that need would fall away. They would not bother doing that. They would live their lives, they would do stuff, and then, they would find clients, or they wouldn't, but the concern wouldn't be there. That's distinct, by the way, from someone like me who teaches sort of client creation as a way of showing up in the world, a way of being, a way for us to hold our work and to be of service to others and to like help people step across a thing. That work, much to the frustration of people that want a fast fix, that work is not about a fast fix. It's about really creating your career as something that's enriching and is not a means to an end, but is an end unto itself. That the very act of creating clients fills you up inside. It nourishes you. It makes you excited. And that's the sort of stuff, when we create things along those lines, we would do it regardless. It stops being about like it stops being a thing we're doing so as to get somewhere, and it becomes a thing we do because it's a natural expression of who we are. So the second order careers that I'm talking about that are designed to get money, but one derived order out, they're careers that would fall away if not for the fact that money is scarce and we need more money. Okay. So now imagine that we had this event, this technology, after we have a little sip of coffee. Good morning, Brooke. Lovely to have you with us. Now let's imagine someone turns on a technology, Google probably, or maybe the Chinese, they do some sort of open source thing, or who knows, maybe it's Tuvalu, I don't know. Suddenly you wake up and money is abundant, meaning there's no more scarcity for money. You don't have to work. That's now optional. You don't have to do anything to get money. And further, you can you can just get whatever you want. So what's going to happen in a world like that is, first of all, those first order careers are going to just disappear because they no longer, their whole premise was operated on money's scarce and you want money. This is not to villainize those careers. I'm just using this as an example. We're building an analogy here. So it's not that those people doing that are bad or wrong or should get out in front or anything like that. But if money suddenly became abundant and available, those jobs would stop really being much of a factor. Of course, there would still be people that, like, even though money's abundant, are like, I want to get the most money. Just like, even though you can have fun playing pickleball at all levels, there's people like me who are like, I want to be the best and aren't. And that's why we work with coaches. So it's not to say that the person that like still wants to make more money, even though money is abundant, is wrong or bad. This isn't to vilify them. And in fact, it's really helpful practice for each of us not to vilify them, to just get like, hey, that's an okay orientation. But so there'll still be some people like that, and thus there will still be a market for these people whose careers are designed to maximize, optimize, to make more money. But that whole market is going to flatten considerably. And anyone who's not operating at a really, really high level of mastery, they're just going to fall away because there's no longer nearly enough demand to warrant having this huge swath of options. So the people at the very, very top will continue to find work because there's always going to be some people, but a lot of the lower, certainly most, if not all of the lower tier, and then probably a good chunk of the middle tier are just going to fall away. They're no longer relevant. And the second thing that's going to happen is all of these second order careers that I've been talking about, like those marketers pitching how to get more client leads or whatever the equivalent is in whatever business you're working in, a lot of that would fall away too. Because like I was saying, if a coach didn't need to make money, they would probably become very uninterested in doing a thing to try to get a hold of clients because they believe they should. They're just not going to bother doing that. They're going to be able to settle in, they're going to be able to relax, and they're going to be able to start to look at things perhaps more organically. We're just like, hey, what would actually feel good in my body? Never mind what I need to do. So big shift. Okay, so that's our analogy. That's what would happen when money stops being scarce. Now I want to look at AI through that same lens and build this case out. The reason that I'm exploring this, not necessarily right now with you, but in my own life, like I've been doing a lot of research in this because I'm scared. I find AI is quite confronting for me. And it's confronting because what I do is I coach people. And what AI has done is a number of things. It's flattened the discoverability layer that I used to be fairly decent in, which is to say, people would come across my writing or my content or something, this podcast, whatever, this live show on social media. And then they would be like, this guy's got some interesting things to say, and maybe they'd continue to listen. We get into some kind of conversation. A relationship could grow slowly, organically from that. They're getting a sense of me just like you are right now. They're like, this guy's kind of cool. It's got dumb jokes, but I kind of like it, whatever. That has been eradicated by AI for a few reasons. Not all of it's AI. Social media has become algorithmic and commodified. And so there's nothing there. Like most of us are not on there looking to listen to what our friends are doing. We're just watching videos. We're avoiding the experience of being bored. That's what most of us are doing when we're on social media now. That's a lot different than connecting with people. So that's totally changed. Plus, because AI has opened this door for anyone to just be like, write me a post about leadership for LinkedIn, designed to do this, blah, blah, blah. AI will do it. And it'll have that like just a bit too polished kind of feel to it with just a few too many M dashes. And it'll have all those sentences are like, blah, 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 blah. Have you noticed that? It's always like this. It's always very single sentences to try to like hammer a point into your head. So that has also meant that like the way I would reach and connect with people, that's gone away because the noise has gotten so much louder and the noise is closer to the signal. It'll never cross the threshold, but it's getting closer and closer and closer. And that means that the only people that are going to hear the signal I'm putting out are the ones that are actually interested in being discerning. And what that means is that again, the people at the high watermark will stick around, but anyone else that was kind of just like reading to hear something interesting or just isn't that interested in like high human truth signal, they're just going to, I'm just going to be washed out, as are probably many of you. So it's very scary. And third, the thing that I found scary is that there's all of this conversation about using AI to coach you. And like, you can ask AI these sort of questions like, what should I do? And it'll give you like a great answer. That's not coaching, by the way, but it'll give you a great answer. And so I've been doing a lot of research, some of it through AI, to get clear what is the distinction between the work I do, between coaching, between the leadership that I am a stand for and that I teach, lead, and develop. What's the distinction between that and what is happening with AI? So that's been my journey through this. It's like kind of being like, fuck, we got to do some stuff. We got to really get our eyes on this. And some of that's included asking coaching questions of AI and seeing how that goes. Because, it's important to, one of the things I see in this moment is a lot of people not really exposing themselves to it and just forming an opinion about why it won't work or why it's not good enough or why it's different. And then telling people, here's why you shouldn't use AI. And that always rings a little bit false because it doesn't have because it often is black or white. Instead of sort of like, well, here's what actually this does do well. Here's what this can replace. Here's why this is something worth considering. When we don't have that side of things and the answer is very like, it's bad for this reason or whatever, that always feels like someone lacking a little bit of depth in their own process. So, we've talked about money and this, the scarcity of that going away. Here's what I assert AI speaks to. What happens when that you can see it, I spoiled it. It's right there. What happens when competency is no longer scarce? So this is what AI provides. AI provides a few things. The first is an abundance of answers. Now, when the internet came into existence, there was an abundance of answers suddenly. Like the excuse of I don't know how, that kind of went away around maybe the sort of pre-pandemic, sort of post-Web 2.0 revolution, maybe 2012, 2015, somewhere thereabouts. There was tons and tons and tons of answers. You could figure out how to do anything. And so the excuse of, I don't know how, I would like to, but I don't know how, that was already on shaky ground. But we could still kind of hang on to this idea, like the reason I'm not doing the thing is a lack of competency, because the answers required a bunch of searching, and you would get an answer that would meet you at a level, but it wouldn't be particular to you. And it was pretty hard to get sort of any feedback or any deeper exploration of the answer you got. It was sort of like, okay, Jim out here in Wichita has posted how to do this thing with my bike. This doesn't look like the same bike as me. I'm having this particular problem. I'm not totally sure, but I think I can muddle through a little bit from there, but I'd have to muddle through. AI takes that to the nth degree. So now, not only can you get an answer, but you can respond and you can say, this answer is missing these three things. Give me those. And then you get that. And you can say, okay, I don't like the way you worded this answer and it feels a little condescending. So actually word it in a way that feels more explanatory for me. Boom, then you get that. So what's available now is a series of answers that are like completely bespoke to what you need. So what that means is that formerly there'd be all these people that had questions about their competence, and then there'd be like a kind of greatest common denominator answer out there in the web that ended up becoming the one that was the most searched out. And then these people with their answers had to kind of plug into that to the best they could. AI doesn't require that of you. AI starts here, but then very rapidly you can narrow it down. And if you're unsure about this, turn on ChatGPT and just start working, like ask it a question that you have. The way I've been working with this is in terms of how I eat, my nutrition. I was like, look, here's the thing. I got a massive sweet tooth. I love candy. It rules. 2, I don't want to eat that much candy. And I'd actually like to cut a bit of weight, lose some body fat. 3, I do not find like tracking calories interesting at all. Give me some kind of system I can follow. And it gave me a system, and the system was still I was just like, that's too much friction for me. I know if I have to start calculating and thinking that stuff out, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it earnestly for a week, and then I'm going to like, fuck this. Okay. So I wrote back, that won't work. Give me 3 rules. And it gave me 3 simple rules to follow. And I was like, that's still going to be too much. Give me 1 rule. So it was like, here's the rule. Whenever you feel like snacking, eat protein first. Okay, but what type of protein? Jerky, fried chickpeas, roasted edamame beans. Great. Where can I go buy those? So you can see you can get hyper specific with this. And what that means is that the answer is abundant. We now live in a time where the lack of an answer is no longer scarce at all. So that's going to do with a few things. Just like that, when money becomes really abundant, what's going to happen when answers no longer are scarce? Well, the first thing is that any profession that is devoted to providing answers is on shaky ground, very, very shaky ground. So good examples of that would be like consulting. What should I do with this? Financial investment starting to get pretty risky because you can turn on your AI. You can say, look at the markets for the last 10 years. Here's what I've heard. This is the advice. What do you think I should do with my money? And it's going to give you like it's not going to give you a cowboy advice unless you asked for that, but it's going to give you a pretty well thought out, reasonable kind of argument. And then you can say, hey, the market's down right now. What should I be doing? And it can give you real-time advice. So any profession where, and this is where we come to competency, any profession where the provision of answers and being someone who has a degree of expertise based on knowing information that others don't is in trouble, or at least it's on rocky ground. We're already seeing this to some extent. Like I think consulting in large part is really like, but it's going to be even bigger as time goes on. Have a sip here. Just like with money, the second order of this is any profession that is providing you something, but is ostensibly something else, but is actually answer based. So an easy place to see this is the coaching profession. Now, coaching, when it's done at a very deep level that is transformational and that creates and develops leadership, does not provide answers. In fact, it's often very infuriating because a lot of the people that find themselves into the profession are wanting answers because that was their stock in trade. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. So they show up and they're like, all right, coach, what should I do? And the coach goes, I don't know. What do you feel like doing? And they're like, what the fuck? Why am I paying you money? It's like, because I'm not going to give you the answer, unlike every other single person that you come to, so on and so forth. So that's what most like the high level coaching looks like. But very few coaches have gone deep enough into their own work to be able to hold a stand like that. And so instead, what most of the coaching profession is giving answers. And those answers come a whole bunch of different ways. They're disguised, right? Sometimes the answer is like a subtle nudge or subtle manipulation. I think this is really great that you're doing this. That's kind of nudging people in a direction instead of letting people discover their own direction. And so that like a large portion of my profession is just going to fall away because where someone is providing answers, that does not have much value anymore. That scarcity is no longer there. And so putting yourself out there from a place of like a position of expertise in giving answers based on knowledge, etc., is really in trouble. Okay, so now we can talk a little bit about leadership, and we can talk about what I think is kind of interesting, which is like, so what does coaching provide? Because that aligns in the conversation with leadership. Just reading what Brooks got here. A shocking amount of healthcare is coming from AI. Oh, I imagine there must be a ton that like people are trying to shift across to like AI based stuff. And it's really interesting. So there is a part of the research I've been doing is exploring. I need a pen to point this. I need a copper pen. This can conduct electricity. Look at that. It's a copper pen. Um, what I'm interested about is in this new world where answers are no longer scarce, what does someone's journey through leadership look like? So up until this point, most of the lower end leadership, lower to middle tier leadership, by the way, I'm not talking about a position in a company. There's a ton of shitty leaders leading very, very high level Fortune 500 companies. So I'm not talking about leadership in terms of what you're in charge of, what you're responsible for, the kind of decisions you're making. I'm talking, when I talk about like high tier leadership, I'm talking about leadership where the leader has a depth of capacity to hold tension and to stand in the face of a need or a desire to collapse tension, either for themselves or for the person whose leadership they're developing. So most of the lower tier leadership is based on competency. And the competency is like number of years of experience. I know a way to do things, sort of being like certain and knowing of like, here's where to go, and so on and so forth. That's going away. Remember that no longer we can no longer differentiate ourselves from other people like that. I can just go to someone and be like, hey, you know, I know that blah, blah, blah. And they can pull up their phone and type it in and be like, well, actually, it seems like the answer is blah, 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 blah. And there's a little bit of nuance here. And what you're saying is partially accurate, and now what do I have to fall back on? Right. Well, I've been doing this for 8 years. Yeah, but this phone that I have has consumed all of the information in the entire world, including people that have been doing it for 80 years. I think I'm going to go with the phone. So leadership relying on competency, leadership on that basis is going to fall away. Or put differently, it's becoming very homogenized. There is not a lot of high demand for that. It's still going to be available. We need managers, stuff like that, at least for the time being. But it's just becoming, it's going to flatten. It's going to become sameified, homogenized. And then as that happens, it'll start to become more and more automated. Okay. So what's the arc that leaders go through? What I think will happen is that at first, just like if there was an abundance of money, if you woke up and had an abundance of money, at first you're going to have a spending spree because there's a huge contrast between where you were and where you now are. And in that contrast, we're like, oh yeah, there's rules. You're going to go out and buy a riding lawnmower and a roller coaster track, and you're going to ride the lawnmower on the roller coaster track, and it's going to be cool and amazing. And boy, you've always wanted to do this. Then that's going to start to lose its sheen because it's sort of like, oh, okay, the contrast will go away. And that, just like when someone wins the lottery, maybe let's put a digression here, a sidebar. Is this a leadership digression moment? Sort of. So, hey, come back here. There we go. So, when we all know on some level, you know, the adage intellectually that money can't buy happiness, but we also know that like a little bit more money does temporarily make you a little bit more happy. And that's the nature of a amplifier. Something that amplifies things for you will make you happier temporarily because there's a diminishing returns to it. So more money will make you happier, but it's always diminishing returns. It's like a curve that goes down like that. You can get more and more and more and more, but you get less and less and less happiness. But if you talk to people subjectively, most of them will report, yeah, I made an extra 5 million, and they feel a little bit better, but it's just a little bit better. There's a line that they can't get past. There's a fundamental, deeper experience of joy, a depth of happiness and aliveness that is unattainable through this diminishing returns process that they're caught in. So this is why when people win the lottery, at first, find me a lottery winner in the first 2 weeks who is not going to tell you like, hey, are you happier? Fuck yeah, I've never been this happy in my life. They're going to be thrilled. But if you check back with them as time goes on, what they're going to find and what you'll find is that money has done nothing to shift their internal state. It's done nothing to change the way they relate to the world. It's done nothing to change the way they relate to other people. And so what happens is, for example, imagine that you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money, and the way you were raised and the belief that you hold and the way you operate, the belief you operate from, is that people are always trying to work some kind of angle. So you're a little bit distrusting of people. It's all right. You don't have a lot of money, so it ensures you don't get scammed. So there's that benefit. If you get a bunch more money, at first you might have an experience of like generosity, because suddenly that contrast allows for that. But pretty soon over time, what's going to happen is that underlying story that people are going to take advantage of you is going to show up again. And this time it's going to be amplified because money scales things. It turns up the loudness. So that internal story gets 10x'd because the amount of money you had got 10x'd. And so now your life is even more about the fact that people are trying to get something from you. And hey, what do you know? Now you have something. So you have to protect it even more. And all of the stuff you used to do to stay safe from people trying to take advantage of you, that volume gets turned up and so on and so forth. So it's an amplifier. So this is what's happening with AI when leaders have answers readily available, is that it amplifies the existing state. I'll give you an example. Or maybe it's the punchline I'm going to give you. I don't know. We're going to find out together. The punchline here is that inside your existing range, you're going to have a series of questions. For example, how do I optimize my performance given I have 40 hours every week? And then AI can answer that for you. It can be like, okay, show me your calendar. Here's my calendar. Okay, rearrange your calendar like this. Okay, great. I've rearranged my calendar like this. Now, only make your days into like one day is going to be your reach out day and one day is going to be client load. One day is deep work. Okay, great. I've got that. What this is doing is it is providing you the perfect answer to optimize within the existing range you have. It is helping you get clear on how to perform better. What AI cannot do, what I have discerned is unavailable to AI, is it can't feel. It cannot feel into what lies underneath the question you are asking. AI is not so good at discerning the unspoken cues. It can only respond to what you ask, and the words that you convey through what you ask come from the surface. So another way to think of this is AI is very good at answering your questions. It is unable to touch the underlying stories and beliefs and context and structure from which your questions arise. So for example, if you have an underlying story that maybe you're like me and you grew up kind of with this fear, this real deep fear of maybe being a disappointment, maybe being a disappointment to others, maybe disappointing yourself, maybe letting people down. This, by the way, always available for me, and I'm always working on this on new ways. It shows up all the time in the stuff I do for fun. I go play pickleball, and if I'm having a bad day, there's a part of me that really wants to grab a hold of like, man, your partner is disappointed in you. You suck. And then I get in my head and then I get all constricted and then I don't have fun and blah, blah, blah. So we can see this stuff everywhere. So maybe you have some of that in you, and maybe you learned, like I did, to deal with that fear by optimizing and being the best inside whatever pond you were swimming in. So put me in any pond and I'm going to be the best fish. Have me show up here and I'm going to be the best. How do I be the best at this law job? How do I be the best at whatever? AI is going to allow you to be the best at something better than you've ever been. It can, whereas before, maybe there was some figuring out and some trial and error to figure out like what's optimal. None of that trial and error needs to happen that much now because you just go, AI, tell me, and it goes, there's your answer. Certified by 8 billion people on this planet. This is what we've discerned. Okay, great. That's how I become the best in this particular thing. The trouble is that what that does is it addresses the kind of the systemic strategy in your leadership of trying to outrun your fear of being a disappointment by being perfect or performing. And so what that answer does, that perfectly curated, perfect, amazingly bespoke answer, is that it gives you exactly what your fear is asking for. And what that does is it gives you those sort of diminishing returns. It kind of provides you that bump or that like alleviation or that soothing balm to your fear, like, yeah, I'm doing the best. But the trouble is that your whole life along this line is basically stacked up on top of an underlying fear that you're a disappointment or you will be a disappointment. There's no rest down that path. And AI is not actually supporting you to overcome this story that you might be a disappointment. It's actually entrenching the belief that you need to manage this story about yourself. It's actually, ironically, reinforcing that. And so what happens is the AIs the answers that we get from AI, they arise out of our existing capacity, our current state, if you want to get technical, our existing ontology, and they reinforce it. So there's another version of they optimize you inside of your existing range, and that narrows your perspective and worldview to that existing range. So the the danger, if you like, it doesn't have to be a danger, but like the risk is AI actually diminishes our possibility faster because it allows us to optimize inside of our existing range faster, which then limits our perspective to that range faster. And that reinforces the idea that all there is our range. So that's the risk. You will get perfect answers, which will kind of like give you a better than ever before belief that like now I've solved it. But it's sort of like AI is helping you optimize the layout of furniture in your apartment instead of helping you get clear, like, I actually don't want to live in this apartment. I want to do the scary thing, knock down the walls of the apartment and build a mansion. And the more you optimize inside the walls of that apartment, the more it seems like, yeah, that's actually, this is the thing to do. This is the best it can get. We can squeeze more juice out of those diminishing returns. There's one final part here. So my research into this has been, what is the inflection point? Like, that's going to get, for some people, that will be sufficient. For many people, and that's okay. Those aren't my people. And if you're here, you're probably not one of these people who will be satisfied with that forever. Eventually, you're going to reach a point where you're like, that's not actually, it felt better for a while, but just like an abundance of money showing up, I still feel scarce in my life, or I still find that I'm annoyed with people, or even though I thought I could do whatever and that would stop me being annoyed with people asking for stuff from me, I still hate these people, and it seems like I'm using this money to build a bigger wall around me. So for those of us that are committed to this deeper journey of leadership, what happens is we reach an inflection point, a point where these answers, this abundance that AI provides, becomes bankrupt on some level. It breaks down. My research has been into what is happening at that inflection point for the leaders that I work with. What's the conversation going on in our heads when we reach that point? And what is the way to speak to those people and to reach those people, to meet them in that moment? When leaders get to this point where they're like, man, there's all the answers in the world and things aren't changing. Why not? What's going wrong? That's like a question that my people are either arriving at, have already arrived at, or are bound to arrive at. And then where do I need to position myself? Where do I need to show up? Where do I need to be to meet them in that moment? Because that is the point where people are ripe for actual transformation. And the cool thing about all of this is AI really supports that transformation, but it cannot cause it. And so it's still scary. All of this stuff is still scary to me because on some level, there was a point where people would run out of answers and then they would just kind of hang out in the safety of that. And then they would seek someone like me. And that was like almost low hanging fruit. Like they'd just come through the door because they're like, I don't know. And the work for them was often quite frustrating because what they really wanted was an answer, but we could meet them there and then begin to build a new way of being that allowed them to live outside of needing to know an answer. We call that freedom. We call that brilliance. That's gone for the most part because AI fills that need now, but it does move them to the bankruptcy of it sooner. So it's really kind of like, it's a scary time, but it's also an exciting time because for the people that are destined to arrive at that inflection point, they're going to get there sooner because they're going to work with these sort of fast, easy, abundant answers until they get to the point where they're like, okay, that was really great, but now what? The second thing that's going to happen is once they arrive there and start to work with someone like me, we can supplement the work that they're doing ontologically. We can supplement the work they're doing to build their capacity to then, once that capacity expands, built like optimized within the new capacity sooner, which then allows them to repeat the cycle, come back and broaden their capacity even more. Historically, what would happen is it would take a long time for people to get to the point where they were fed up and they were like, it's not working. They do a bunch of work with me, and then they get to this point where they're like, oh, I've expanded my capacity. What do I do now? And then they go back out into the world and they'd sort of like see where they'd kind of see what options were available, how things went, what new stuff became available, and then they'd slowly reach the full extent of that capacity for their leadership, and then they'd be ready for what's next. AI makes the cycle through this process just available faster. We can move through it quicker if we want. Quicker does not mean without sobriety or without wisdom. It just means that our own natural tempo we can actually unfold into with more ease. That's what quickness is. If you want to be quick, what being quick is actually about is developing the ability to really trust your own tempo and trust yourself that you unfold at exactly and precisely the rate you unfold. And any attempt to speed through that or to slow it down gets in the way. So the more aligned you are with your own tempo of unfolding and the more you can empower that, the faster you end up being. It's very ironic or counterintuitive, I guess, because I've used ironic too many times. Okay. So that's the work that I'm looking at, is like this inflection point. What happens? I think there was one other thing I was going to say. Let me just check. Yeah, that might be the end of it for today. So, I was going to talk briefly about distinguishing our capacity as leader. So before we go there, we'll wind down this last topic. So ultimately, we're going to see some real shifts, some real change. We're also going to see like some real capital flow moving around. And I was sharing with someone I was talking to, like, I just remembered the thing I was going to say. I'll make a note here so I don't forget it. EOS. There we go. It would be one thing if this AI transformation was happening at a point where our economies were running like full steam, where the economy was a bull market, it was very, but it's not. We're in a bear market. There's so much uncertainty in the world. The president of the United States is doing all kinds of wacky things. And sure, if you believe he has a plan, that's great. You believe he has a plan. But for the rest of us, it's very hard to discern what the hell the plan is. And so it's very uncertain. And markets don't love uncertainty. They like certainty. And so as a result, capital is pulled out of the markets. People are kind of like hedging their bets. People are less likely to make investments. And so all of this revolution happening with AI is happening at a time when the economy is down, which is just like, ugh, it'd be nice if it was the other way around. Either way, there's going to be a cool revolution. We're going to see some real shifts, and it's valuable and worth, I think, getting clear what is distinct about what I do, and for yourself, not Adam. I've told you, you don't have to research what's distinct about what I do, what you do. That's a joke. What is distinct about what you do, and where is the boundary between what AI can provide and that thing? And then where does your expertise actually still become, not hold relevant, but actually become more relevant? Because the thing is that, with what I've been looking at, what I can see is the old model of leadership, competency reigns supreme. And so the person that knew the most and had the most and, the most experience and everything was at the top. That's all going to get flattened. And it's going to become very hard to discern leaders. Like, you can't stand out based on what you know anymore. That just won't work. So for people that are looking for an edge, that ontological work, that leadership where we develop capacity, is just become a higher and higher and higher edge for people. That's the edge that is available now, is not to get better in our existing range, but to expand that range. The last thing I was going to say on this was I've been exploring the EOS, which is called the entrepreneur. It's an acronym for entrepreneur or entrepreneurial operating system. If you've read Traction or Get a Grip, those are two books based out of that model. And EOS is a very brilliant model, which is that entrepreneurs, their businesses get to a certain point where the old patterns and systems and approaches start breaking down. They've reached too much revenue, they've reached too many people. It's like when you move from a village to a city, suddenly you have problems that the village could handle when it was just 150 people, but on the scale of 3 million people, those systems no longer work. And so EOS is a systemic approach to address these sort of things. So it's very brilliant because it meets a lot of business leaders in a very clear inflection point, which is you've grown to this point. You are already noticing that your business is like stuttering, is staggering. And what's being asked of you is to create systems that actually allow you to thrive and to run. And when that is installed, the system becomes much smoother. This is sort of a little, I'm not saying AI is going to take that over. That requires some human support to make happen. But what happens at the end of EOS is then the leadership. So EOS creates a business that is very smooth operationally through its systems. Once that's handled, what comes to the surface next is the breakdowns in leadership capacity. They become visible, more visible once the systems are actually addressed. Up until that point, it's really hard. Why am I going to work with a leadership coach? Like, we're having trouble just even managing all of our tasks. We're not interested in deepening some capacity. We need to actually like just be able to run a meeting. That's what EOS is great for. And I think AI is going to have a similar effect where it's going to help us address a lot of the stuff on the surface that's like, we can't seem to figure out. That's going to get handled. And then the leadership capacity is what comes next. I said I was going to talk about distinguishing your capacity as a leader, but we've been going for an hour. And I don't have too much more time before I need to get going. So we'll finish that coffee. Anything else I want to invite people? Oh yeah. You, if you don't already follow my podcast, you should. It's here. What a dumb link. I'm just looking at this link. It's stupid. AdamQuiney.com/podcast-2/ I don't know why that's my link. Bad at business. You can search for the transformational leader space Adam Quiney, and that'll take you to my podcast. These episodes, these live shows are always posted on the podcast as a midweek episode. And then I also do an episode released every Monday that is no more than 30 minutes in length, where I break down some sort of leadership content, some kind of piece of leadership that seems obvious. You know, it's often the stuff people are posting on LinkedIn. The leader always sees last. And then I look at that in a lot more depth so we can see why these rules actually create problems and what's actually the systemic issue to address underneath, and how do we broaden our capacity as a leader rather than just become better at following rules like I must eat last. So that's a good resource for you. And then the last thing that I'm gonna put up here is the Forge Public Calls. If you're interested in taking this work from theory into a little bit of practice, this is the smallest bridge. You know, it's kind of edgy. And the way that I find leaders move through this work is at first they begin to understand it a bit conceptually. They understand how our beliefs actually create our actions, create a world around us, and then reinforce. They start to understand these things like context and clearing and responsibility and forgiveness. So that's the first stage. And at that stage, it's all intellectual. We understand it, but we haven't, it's like understanding how to ride a bike. And then we might try to put that into effect in our lives, but it's all done by ourselves. And it can only get us so far. We can only get so far. The Forge Public Calls are like the next step people move through, where this starts to slowly move from conceptual to actually practiced and experienced. There's nothing you need to do on these calls. You can just register, show up, and sit quiet. But what you'll see is we'll do a little bit of teaching, myself or members of our leadership team. And then what we'll do is we'll open the floor for support, and we'll support someone through this work. And what happens when people put their hand up to be supported is that these concepts get put into action in their lives in real time. So they actually become operationalized and they actually get the experience of putting this into work. And whether you're someone getting supported or not, what that does, even if you just witness someone else doing it, it allows this work to almost like take root in your brain on a much deeper level than just in the theory. So it's a really good place to begin to further your understanding, your mastery, your experience, your depth as a leader. You can go to evergrowthcoaching.com/ this is a heck of a URL too, the-forge-public-calls, the Forge Public Calls, hyphens in between all of them. I'm in the process of getting that website updated, but I've got 60 million things to do, and that is lower on the list. So for now, you just have to deal with a crappy, stupid URL. I apologize, and thank you for your patience. That's a really great place to come. We'd love to see you there. Okay, all the banners are gone. There's my name. There's my own address, adamquiney.com. I hope all of y'all have an amazing weekend. Andre, thanks again for tuning in. It's super cool to see you show up today. And Brooke, nice to have you here too. If anything is sparked by this conversation today, put it in the comments, tag me. I love to hear about I really love to hear what you got or what you noticed, but I'm especially keen when people are spicy and put something in the comment like, well, you said this, but I actually feel this way. That's the richest place that we can engage, because that's where ideas are born. Ideas are born on the transition, the boundaries. So if you got a spicy thing to say, if I didn't fully convince you and you want to let me know, I would love to hear it. Have an amazing weekend, everyone. Take care.